Blaire, welcome to Mormon Happy Hour. I once again brought Blaire Ostler on the show, and so I wanted to give her a quick opportunity to introduce herself, and then I'll talk about why I brought her on the show. So welcome, Blaire.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've been on the show before, Blaire Ostler. I'm a philosopher and a student emphasizing in queer theory and gender theory. I'm also the CEO of the Mormon Transhumanist Association, where I also focus on queer and feminist issues. And I'm really happy to be on the show again.
I am thrilled to have you back. Your expertise and your philosophical musings are far more eloquent than anything that I could ever say, and I really, really admire you. So thank you so much for coming back and enlightening my listeners and making me look so much more like I know what the hell I'm talking about. So thank you.
Well, thank you. You flatter me.
Hey, I try. I got to keep you coming back. All right, so I brought Blaire on today because just recently it has been announced that the November 2015 policy, which has been lovingly dubbed the Exclusion policy, that was accidentally, not on purpose, leaked. A new policy that the church came out with that they put in Handbook 1. It was leaked in 2015. And actually, before I get too far into rambling myself, there is a little snippet that I wanted to read from a Salt Lake Tribune article that deals with this issue. So let me go ahead and just get to that clip, and it will kind of explain, in case you aren't familiar with the exclusion policy, it will explain this all to you. So this is an article in the Salt Lake Tribune titled "This Week in Mormon Land." So the heading is, "Preach My Gospel Preaches the Gay Policy." The church's hotly disputed November 2015 policy, which declared same-sex Mormon couples apostates and generally forbidding their children from religious rites until they turn 18, has found a home not only in the faith's handbook for bishops and stake presidents, but also in its training manuals for missionaries. The updated Preach My Gospel, a field guide of sorts for proselytizers, contains the following condition that must be met before missionaries can baptize a minor. The child's primary residence is not with parents who are polygamous or in a same-sex relationship. If one or both of the child's parents are polygamous, you must contact the mission president for additional information. For additional information regarding children of parents in same-sex relationships, see First Presidency Letter, November 13th, 2015. And that is the actual November 2015 exclusion policy that it links. And this is all found in it links to the mormonnewsroom.org. Addison Jenkins, a Brigham Young University student and openly gay Mormon, told KUER's Lee Hale that the addition to Preach My Gospel appears to be cementing in place the 2015 policy. That exclusionary decree, he said, essentially told gay Latter-day Saints, if you want to be gay and Mormon, okay, but you have to be Mormon and you can't really be gay. So, turn the time over to you, Blaire. What's your reaction?
Well, I'm definitely not in favor of the exclusion policy. I think it's a horrible policy. I don't think we should have it. And there are many reasons for why that is, but not sure how much you want to go into that. So the idea of the policy coming around to avoid the conflict of a child being raised in a home in which their parents are living a different standard. I'm using air quotes when I say that word, standard, as what the teachings of the LDS Church do, is kind of a silly way to justify your homophobia, because there are a lot of parents who teach things that are contrary to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So if your primary issue is to protect the children from having parents who have conflicting views with the church, well, you're just going to have to get rid of all kids who come from interfaith families. If your husband's an atheist, forget it. Your kids can't be baptized. And it just makes a lot of sense to say that, well, we're just going to exclude the children to protect them. That's really, that theory rings false to me. So now that we have this policy in place, though, and with that being said, that I adamantly disagree with this policy. I'm not particularly surprised that this is now in the Preach My Gospel manual. It actually, in some ways, makes a lot of sense. You can't have missionaries going out in the mission field and teaching these things and preparing people for baptism when there's a specific group of people or children who cannot get baptized right now. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to send your missionaries out into the mission field without all the information. Like, my nephew is out on his mission right now. I don't even think if he knows the November policy even exists. So for someone like him to go out into the mission field, I'm sure there are a lot of missionaries that don't.
Wow.
There are missionaries, there are people who still don't know the church essays exist. Anyway, to send someone out in the mission field to go out and preaching the gospel and doing these things and preparing people for baptism, but then not having in the Preach My Gospel manual, well, X person can't get baptized. I mean, if we're going back to 1965, it should probably be in the manual. Yeah, Black people can't go get sealed in the temple together. I mean, because it's just a policy. If you're a Black person investigating the church, I would want to know that off the bat. So to me, 1, the policy is horrible. 2, I am not surprised to see it in the Preach My Gospel manual.
That is,
unfortunately.
That's an excellent point. And I didn't even think of that. In my mind, I'm like, great, they're just doubling down on the policy and they're putting it one more place. But you are absolutely right that it makes complete sense that they would put it in the Preach My Gospel manual, because you're right, they can't baptize them, so they might as well not even preach the gospel to them, because that's just a waste of quality, precious mission time and their time to spread the gospel. Absolutely.
Right. And I think part of it as well, why it was such a hard blow for some people, I think people were hoping that, this is going to be a temporary thing. This is going to go away, that we'll get rid of this really fast. And so solidifying it in the Preach My Gospel did kind of take away that sense of hope for activist change and things like that. For me, it doesn't. It just means, okay, this is going to be a lot slower on the timeline than what I wanted it to be. But I tend to be cautiously optimistic about change in the LDS Church, which gets me into a lot of trouble. But with that being said, though, I mean, it's sad, but at the same time makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. You are much more optimistic about change than I am. I think that's another reason why it was so hard for me, because exactly like you said, we had this hope that it would go away, and and that's why a lot of people have dubbed it the doubling down of the exclusion, because not only are they not taking it out and slowly letting it fade, we're going to push it forward in all of our manuals. And I mean, it took them 3 years, which that's kind of surprising to me, but again, it's going in not the direction that we wanted to. It still shows that their trajectory is opposite to what we want.
Exactly. No, I think that is definitely a valid point and a valid problem. I think part of the thing is our timeline for LGBT inclusion is also contingent upon just basic feminist timeline. There's not going to be full LGBT inclusion until women are ordained to the priesthood, because you can't have 2 lesbians living together without priesthood in their home and just all sorts of things. So there's going to be a lot of events that have to occur and take place prior to, the full acceptance of LGBT individuals and their children being able to be baptized. So I don't delude myself into any idea that these things are going to happen soon. I mean, I hope they happen in my lifetime. I would love to be able to see the day where, a lesbian couple is baptizing their biological offspring in the church. I think that'll be fabulous. It's just going to be a much slower process than maybe what people are hoping for.
Absolutely. And a plug for the Community of Christ. You can totally do that in the Community of Christ.
This is true. Definitely. If that is your desire, definitely go with the Community of Christ.
So I wanted to move on to another article that I found. It was a blog post on the Wheats and Tares, and it begins, and this is written by Marianne on August 16th, and I'll have a link to all of these articles that I'm referencing in the show notes. This year's crop of seminary students will learn about how prophets receive revelation by studying the creation of the November 2015. This year's crop of seminary students will learn about how prophets receive revelation by studying the creation of the November 2015 exclusion policy. In the new Doctrinal Mastery, Doctrine and Covenants, and Church History teacher material, seminary teachers are instructed to share President Russell M. Nelson's January 2016 statement during the Prophets and Revelation lesson, Part 1. In that lesson, Nelson explains how leaders came to embrace the exclusion policy as the divine solution to a thorny problem. It's even suggested that teachers print out the statement so students have their own hard copy. And so I wanted to just kind of, I don't know if I even want to read this, but it basically, and I'll have this all in the show notes as well, but it talks about the process by which President Nelson claims the exclusion policy came to the brethren as revelation, which, again, this came out after the policy was leaked and just basically distributed. And so instead of it being a policy, Nelson doubled down and made sure that it was known that it was a revelation, again, with the air quotes on all of these words. And so not only now is it going to be in Preach My Gospel to make sure they're not preaching the gospel to, filthy apostate same-sex couple children, but now it's being touted as an exemplar of how inspiration is received, which again feels so insincere. But again, Blaire, what's your reaction to this?
Yeah, I find this way more problematic than the Preach My Gospel. The Preach My Gospel makes sense. We're trying to clarify. We're getting things, setting missionaries up for success, air quotes. But putting it in the seminary manual for how revelation occurs. Now, that seems overkill to me. That was a completely unnecessary step. I can see maybe the necessity of Preach My Gospel, but the necessity of having it in the seminary manual, that feels like border maintenance. We want you to know that this, with like true revelatory certainty, that God does not want you to be gay. And if you are gay, you need to get that fixed up right now. The sad thing is I don't even think they're really thinking about LGBT youth while they're putting this in. I don't think that message is there for LGBT youth at all. LGBT youth are kind of just going to be this unspoken casualty in the seminary manual. What this is designed to do, from my perspective, is this is designed to speak to your core audience, the people who are already on board with you, to make sure, hey, stay in the boat. This is what revelation looks like. The prophet is doing it. And no matter what's going on in your other life, no matter if your friends are telling you it's fine, or if you have a gay cousin or whatever and whatnot, this is the Lord's word. And we need our youth to know that and be indoctrinated with that right off the bat. That's very troubling, very troubling. Again, I don't think they mean harm to the LGBT youth, but I can only imagine being a seminary student and having this, there was nothing about that when I was in seminary. So in a weird way, it was kind of easier when I was growing up and being like, yeah, I'm attracted to women and no one ever talks about it. So I guess it's okay, but it's kind of shameful, but we're not going to talk about it. Now it's overt out there, just no, you cannot be yourself. And if you are being yourself, you're against God's revelatory prophets. And so that's got to be a lot for queer youth to grapple with. It's dangerous. Lives are on the line. It is dangerous to proclaim that kind of thing as being revelatory. On the other side, what I'm thinking as far as you're seeing this repeatedly with President Nelson, now that he's using the word revelation a lot, and he's claiming revelation with a little more authority and a little more gumption and a little more rigor than, that Monson did. Mm-hmm. So there could be a two-pronged effect to this. one, I think it's really could be a really cool idea to embrace the idea of revelation, so long as it's not a domineering, authoritative revelation, accepting that revelation comes about of all sorts of things. Oh, guess what? We bought new whatever for our MTC comes about by revelation. This is how revelation works. It's an ongoing process among a group of people and communities and ideas within a church. However, that's not the way President Nelson is using revelation here. He's doing it in an authoritarian manner in that I am speaking for God. Like, this is serious business. This isn't the type of continuing revelation that I feel like Joseph Smith was talking about. This is a different kind of revelation. This is a revelation used to keep people in line, to maintain order. And I know that's like maybe a more negative and cynical view, but that's all I can take from the actions that are happening right now.
Absolutely. Wow. Absolutely. I see this in the seminary manual, like you said. Like, I do feel that it is also speaking to LGBTQ youth, because it's in the seminary manual. It's going to the youth, and what a damaging time for them to get that message when they're already, like, that's right when they're struggling with these issues for the first time in their life, when they're trying to find their identity and wrestle with, like, well, this is who I'm attracted to, but this is who the church tells me I should be attracted to. And like, that's right then, right there. And then in the seminary class that they're going to in high school, when this is all going down, like, then they read this, and I'm just, it's so dangerous. Yeah. It's so,
and not only that, it puts just the straight cisgender youth, it puts them in an awkward position too. And I'd be really interested to see how this all plays out, because millennials in general are moving away from established religion, which I don't want to conflate with like atheism or anything like that. But what is Pew Research has demonstrated is that the millennial population is kind of getting tired of religious establishments. They still maintain their spirituality and belief in God, but with something like this going into a seminary manual where youth are already prone to start to leave the church and not really care as much about what is happening within the confines of the organizational structure, I'll be very curious to see if people are just like, well, that's just stupid. My cousin is gay and he's fine, you know. My sister is trans and she's fine, you know what I mean? And so to read things like this, it will be very interesting to see how the youth respond to this, because I don't know how much longer the church can do this, like, stay in the boat, double down, this is the authority of God, I'm giving you revelation, without the youth going, you know what? I live in an interconnected world now where I talk to people of all sorts of different beliefs that aren't mine. The youth today are more now than ever connected to people with different views other than their own. So this whole kind of dogmatic tribalism, us versus them, we got to adapt. We got to change, because the youth are getting really conflicting messages saying, but this person here is really kind and really good person, yet you're telling me they can't be a part of my religion. It's really, I mean, talk about like protecting children, giving mixed messages, like,
yeah. And, and that's a really good point. And that's one that obviously I struggled with on my way out of the Mormon church, is that these revelations from God, they're supposedly God's word. And I'm like, raising my hand in the back going, yeah, that's not the God that I know. That's not the God that I met when you were telling me to pray to him as a youth. Like, that's not the God that I know, that I communed with, and that I want to follow. Like, no, I'm not signing up for that God. And so that's another, like, cognitive dissonance, I guess you can say, between the you know, this millennial population is going to be addressing, is like, well, this is the God that I know, but this is the God that you're saying is talking to you. I'm like, pick one.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So what happens when, you know, personal revelation conflicts with authoritative patriarchal revelation?
Amen.
And they're going to be that. They're going to be greeted with that early on. So in a weird way, I'm like really hoping the youth will kind of be like, well, that's weird, and scratch their heads and plant a little seed of doubt in there as far as like,
Yeah.
that's going to be the thing. Again, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I hope it does cause the youth to reconsider, wow, this is what Revelation looks like. This is how he's using Revelation, because what I learned about Revelation, that's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I hope the youth feel empowered that authoritative revelation cannot override personal revelation for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
For yourself, your connection to God is way more important if you believe in God, which hopefully seminary students do, because then they're going to have some serious cognitive dissonance. But no, I mean, your connection with God is far more important than what someone else is telling you about what God thinks.
Mm-hmm. I totally and completely agree about, hopefully, planting that seed, but my fear is like, at what cost? That's what my fear is.
Oh, totally. No. Yeah. And just to reiterate, this is all horrible. Like, so when I try to present like the logic of making sense and why they're doing things, that's not condoning what they're doing. It's just processing the information of what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, it's very upsetting and disturbing. I imagine this is what it's like being a member of like a progressive member of the church in like 1959 and being like, really it's going to take another 20 years for us to figure this out, and then at the last minute, now is the time. Ugh.
So before we wrap up, I also in this Wheats and Tares blog, the author did mention, interestingly, this isn't the first time someone has tried to put Nelson's exclusion policy as revelation statement in the seminary curriculum. As I reported 2 years ago, Nelson's statement initially appeared in the Doctrinal Mastery New Testament Teacher Manual when the Doctrinal Mastery program was brand new. Within a few months, that statement was removed, as well as statements indicating the temple and priesthood ban was divinely inspired. If you compare the two screen captures, you can tell that the current 2018 instructions and questions surrounding Nelson's statement is based heavily on the redacted 2016 material. So they put it in, then they took it out a few months earlier, and then when they're putting it in this year, it's a lot of the same rhetoric, a lot of the same wording, minus possibly the priesthood ban, thank God. Oh my God.
Can you imagine? Like seriously, Colleen, my inner monologue just wants to scream out, it's 2018. Please join us when you're ready. Join us when you're ready. But this going back and forth on putting things in manuals and just, there's been a lot of things like that in the queer community, right? Or Mormon queer community. There's the Mormon and Gays website, which I think was a good thing. And there have been a lot of good things happening, but then there's these horrible things happening. And I think what we're seeing here is the church in and of itself, or the church as a leadership group, not everyone is on the same page about what's going on. They're still figuring out their stuff. And unfortunately, people are getting hurt in the meantime while they figure out what they're doing. But not everyone is agreeing on what should be done with the gays, what should be done with queer people, And so it's definitely, you get excited when you get a good thing. You feel bad when there's a bad thing. And there's going to be a lot more jostling back and forth to figure these things out. And unfortunately, like, the church is a patriarchal gerontocracy. So it's being led by old white men until they die. Then there's new leadership and succession. And I think that's a bigger problem than anything else we're dealing with right now. Like, the succession of leadership is a serious problem. But unfortunately, this jostling back and forth is just part of the process, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The church, even church leadership, even the apostles aren't a monolith. They don't agree on all these things. They function as a board of directors. And if you've ever been in a board of directors meeting, it gets heated. People don't agree. You have senior board members, you have junior board members, and it's political, and there's so much bureaucracy in it. So going back and forth, I mean, it's to be expected. It's disappointing. I mean, encourage the good and, point out the bad.
Mm-hmm. And just to wrap up some other themes that are going on this same week, we've been talking about, you know, how he's you mentioned that Nelson is very like, oh, revelation and inspiration and from God, and I'm going to talk about this a lot. Let's talk about the rebranding that he literally
right?
that he literally phrased as, I have received inspiration from God. I'm like, really? That's what's so important? We're using the wrong freaking name? That's what's so important. Yeah. And then go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Yeah. I'm like, yes, so many thoughts. I don't even know where to start. So it's comical on multiple levels, right? We've got Mormon Tabernacle Choir, Mormon and Gays, Mormon Newsroom, and it's just like, do you know how much logistically this rebranding is costing? Rebranding is so costly, and guess what? It's not going to take. People are still going to use the word Mormon, and the funny thing is, other people are still. This isn't even just a in the tribe issue. Everybody outside the Mormon tribe is still going to call us Mormon. They don't care that you proclaimed it from God. They don't care. They're going to keep calling us Mormon. It's just too many. No, too much. But yeah, and it is sad that he used kind of the revelatory card on that, because it is kind of like, it feels a little mockingly to their serious issues happening in the world right now, and God cares most about what the Mormon Church is calling itself, or sorry, the LDS Church. Oh, sorry, no, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Church. You know what I mean? And so I'm just saying, I think God has a lot bigger things to worry about that we should be worrying about, putting our resources in, than a remarketing and rebranding of something that was already tried a decade or so ago. And guess what? It didn't take. But so he is using the revelation card a lot lately, which is going to be really interesting, like how long you can keep playing that card and have it have that significant impact and meaning. Because if you keep using it over and over, it's kind of like, you know, if I don't even know how to, I don't know how long that's going to last. You know what I mean? When it's, you know, on something so insignificant, then like Mormon branding. The funny thing is also, I have to add one more thing in here. The interesting thing in not the seminary manual, but in the Preach My Gospel, it also talks about children of polygamous children of polygamous heritage or family, and how they need to be taken into consideration too, is like, okay, sorry, if your parents are practicing polygamy, you can't be baptized into the church. But yet for some reason we want to ignore the fact that President Nelson is sealed to 2 women, and while he may not be practicing earthly polygamy, he is practicing serial monogamy. Now, in Mormonism, that means something when you're sealed in the temple. So you're either going to be polygamous in the eternities, or you're spiritually or theologically polygamous. Use whatever semantics you like. It's not earthly or legal polygamy. It's a different type of polygamy. But the funny thing is, when we talk about not allowing polygamous families into the church, but when our prophet is sealed to 2 women, it either says A, our prophet doesn't believe he's going to be married to 2 women in the afterlife, and he doesn't believe our theology, and he's not taking our theology seriously, because, I mean, if you believe it, well, you're polygamist, at least in your heart. And so if you were taking this seriously, there's just a lot of contradictions going on, to where it's like, we're trying to get rid of all sorts of different demographics, the queers, the polygamists, and everything, to make this hetero mononormative, you know, a Protestant church. And I'm just thinking, like, what happened here? Are we even Mormon anymore? President Nelson's revelation says, no, we're not Mormon anymore. In fact, we're just like not even there. And I'm just like, what church is this now? Like, what are we doing when we are so blatantly exclusionary of just like queer youth, or our polygamous roots, or in denial that our prophet is a polygamist, at least minimally theologically speaking? And so when he plays the revelation card like that, I'm having a hard time taking Nelson seriously right now. I'm having a hard time taking him seriously. There's some cognitive dissonance happening here, Colleen, okay?
and you're rifling through all those names, and I'm like, wait, but they said the church is okay. And I'm like, what? Like, that's just such a totally like Prince losing his whole name and going with the sign. Like, the church is the most like nondescript descriptor you can possibly use, and that's approved? Like,
right. Well, and it's also strange too, because it's kind of like, it's like super like American Anglo-centric in that, you know, the Catholic Church and Catholics call their church the church. Like, a lot of religions call their church the church. So what makes you think that our church is the church? Well, there you have it. Like, we have this very centric view of like eternal one and only truth claims that are going to like move past beyond everything else. And it's just, I don't know. There's so much more room for inclusivity that's just not happening. That's very disappointing. And there's all these contradictions and revelations right and left. And I'm just like, golly, let's get our story straight first before you throw down the revelation card.
Right? So, because I want to talk to you forever, the last like hot topic that I wanted to tie in is you were talking about how we're run by this gerontocracy and how they hold to these old traditional, you know, conservative beliefs from like back in their childhood. Let's look at Prop 2 and how all of these men grew up during a time when marijuana, not cannabis, marijuana was this deadly poison that was going to kill you and destroy our culture and our society. And until that died, like that is so blatantly clear in their behavior and in their rhetoric, to, you know, in regards to opposing Prop 2, that I'm like, not until these men are gone can our church move forward. We are just like hardcore stuck in the 20s and 30s, and we're not moving forward.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate, because I mean, as a transhumanist, I am a staunch advocate of technologies that expand human abilities and radical flourishing, not to mention life extension technologies. So I feel so conflicted about this idea of extending people's lives when people who are in positions of leadership and control of authority with a lifetime sentence. This is a problem. And this is a problem for our church. Well, it's a problem outside the church too. I mean, like, think about Supreme Court justices, all sorts of things, that like these lifetime terms of till death, that needs to change. Those laws were written back when life expectancy was not where it's at right now. You know, you're like, you're going to die when you're 60 or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't have exact numbers on it, but the idea of the patriarchal gerontocracy being in charge of taking care of all these leadership things, like, as technologies and medicine gets better and better, people are going to be in positions of power longer and longer. And what the LDS Church really needs to do, like many other patriarchal gerontocracies, not singling anyone out, but like what we really need to do is figure out successions of power that aren't determined upon a person's death. Yeah. I hate that we have to talk about, wow, at least when Nelson dies, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't want to talk like that. Like, how inhumane and rude, and just like, I don't want him to die. I don't want you to be in charge of speaking for God all the time, but that doesn't mean I want you to die either. And
but
so
it forces,
really need to figure out.
It forces our hand to say that, because that's the only way he's going to not be in charge. It's terrible.
Yeah, it is terrible. We need to figure out different ways of passing on successions of power and authority in institutions. And the LDS Church, they're going to have to grapple with that at some time. Because, like, if you think about it, like, President Nelson, like, his mom was probably part of, like, if you think about it, he was probably raised by a woman who could tell you when women got the right to vote. Like, this is the woman he was raised by, right? You know what I mean? And so now if you think about my children, and like they have a queer mom and everything's not a big deal, and think about them bridging the gaps of the generations and trying to, and I'm not talking about anything new here. This is a problem that's been happening forever, but trying to bridge these gaps. I mean, we need to figure out other ways of having leadership and other ways of including diverse ages, diverse genders, diverse experiences, ethnicities, races, and so on. Because I don't know how long the patriarchal gerontocracy can hold its grip. And I guess maybe people said that back when blacks and there was the temple priesthood banned. But you know what? The more time goes on, we are becoming so connected in so many ways. Like, again, like with this in the seminary manual, kids are growing up with queer friends and queer family members. And how long do you think they're going to sit around and be like, well, yep, sorry, you can't come to heaven with us? Like, how long is that going to last?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully not long. Hopefully not long. Not if I have anything to say about it.
You have more hope than I do, Blaire. Much more hope.
Yeah. I'm going to go talk to some people. I'm going to straighten this out. Don't worry, Colleen. I'm going to set up some meetings. I'm going to fix this. It's going to be okay.
Thank you. Someone's got to do it. Thank you. Oh God, well, I think we got it all. Thank you so much for coming back. Thank you for hashing this out for me and sharing your opinions, because I definitely value them. And it's interesting to talk to you, because here you are, you're still in it. And yet we can still
yes, that's true.
Although, I mean, look what's behind me and what I'm doing right now. I'm still in it. Let's be honest.
Own the Mormonism. Own it. Mormonism is so much bigger. Own it. I love being Mormon. No matter where my church attendance is, like, and I know people have problems with that. I love being a Mormon, and I couldn't not be Mormon even if I didn't want to. It's
Amen.
like being queer. I couldn't not be queer even if I didn't want to. I just need to learn to love and embrace and make the best of what I am.
That's what I'm doing.
Excellent.
Oh, thank you so much, Blaire. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anytime. Hopefully I didn't go off on too many tangents.
Hey, it's what we're here for. I love it.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much.
Totally.
I can't find my mouse. Okay, there. Nope. Yeah, there it is. Okay.